Welcome, everyone. Today, we are diving into one of the most fascinating topics in animal behavior, the courtship rituals of the three-spined stickleback. If you have ever wondered how animals choose their mates and ensure they are making the right choice, you are in the right place. We're going to build our understanding from the ground up, looking at both the biology and the surprising mathematics behind this complex underwater dance. Now that we have introduced our topic, let us start with an intuitive analogy to understand how these rituals function. Imagine you are trying to enter a highly secure bank vault. You need a specific sequence of passwords, fingerprints, and retinal scans. If you get even one step wrong, the vault immediately locks down and you have to start all over again. In the animal kingdom, courtship often works exactly like this secure vault. It acts as a strict, step-by-step test. For the three-spined stickleback fish, mating is a beautiful but unforgiving dance. The male and female must exchange the correct signals in a precise, unbreakable order. If either fish misses a cue, the entire courtship is abandoned. Building on that bank vault analogy, let us look at the formal scientific definition. In ethology, which is the study of animal behavior, this strict sequence is called a reaction chain. It consists of alternating fixed action patterns. A fixed action pattern is simply an innate, hardwired behavior that is triggered by a specific cue in the environment, known as a sign stimulus. During breeding season, the male develops a bright red belly, and the female develops a swollen silver belly. These physical appearances act as visual sign stimuli. When they see each other, it triggers the first innate move, setting off a sequential chain of stimuli and responses that must be completed perfectly. Now that we know what a reaction chain is, let us visualize the exact sequence for the stickleback. On the screen, you see a flowchart mapping the alternating behaviors. It starts on the left with the male performing a zigzag dance. This triggers the female to swim toward him. Her approach then triggers him to lead her to the nest. She follows, which prompts him to show the nest entrance. Once she enters, he prods her tail, and finally, she spawns the eggs. Notice how the arrows zigzag back and forth between the male and female columns. Every single action is the required trigger for the partner's next move. If any link breaks, the sequence halts. Having seen the precise steps of the dance, we must ask why nature designed it this way. This reaction chain is fundamentally important because it acts as a biological reproductive isolation mechanism. It prevents the stickleback from accidentally wasting precious energy meeting with a completely different species. Furthermore, it allows the female to rigorously assess the male's health. A male that cannot perform a fast, vigorous zigzag dance is likely sick or genetically inferior. However, this reliance on visual cues makes them highly vulnerable. Modern environmental pollutants like water turbidity or chemical disruptors can interfere with these visual sign stimuli, potentially causing devastating population collapses in fragile aquatic ecosystems. Understanding this vulnerability leads us to quantify the courtship chain mathematically. Because each step relies entirely on the success of the previous one, we model this using the probability of sequential, independent events. The formula on your screen uses the mathematical product notation, represented by the large pi symbol. Here, P is the total overall probability that the fish will successfully complete the dance and spawn. The variable n represents the total number of required steps, which is typically around 5. The variable p sub I represents the probability of success for each individual step. If the water becomes murky due to pollution, the visual variable p sub I decreases. Because these probabilities are multiplied together, even a small drop in p sub I forces the overall probability p to drop dramatically. Now that we have our formula, let us see this with a concrete example in perfectly clear water. We are given a strict four-step reaction chain, so our n equals 4. The probability of each individual step succeeding is given as 0.90. We need to calculate the overall probability of a successful mating event. First, we expand the product notation for the 4 specific steps, multiplying P1 through P4. Next, we substitute our given probability of 0.90 into each variable. Finally, we perform the multiplication. 0.90 multiplied by itself 4 times gives us a final answer of 0.6561. This means there is a 65.61% chance the entire mating sequence finishes successfully. So, we have calculated that the success rate is roughly 65.6%. This brings us to an important biological deduction. Let us look at the mathematical reasoning behind this result. If the success rate is 65.6%, we subtract this from 100% to find the failure rate, which is 34.4%. The math clearly shows that even when individual events are highly probable at 90%, chaining them together makes the final outcome significantly less likely. Nearly 1/3 of all attempts will naturally fail. This high failure rate is actually an evolutionary feature, not a bug. It mathematically ensures that only the most persistent, accurate, and healthy fish manage to reproduce and pass on their genes. Having proven how the strict sequence filters out weak mates, we must now consider the physical toll this takes on the male. The zigzag dance is highly energetically demanding. In biology, we call this an honest signal of fitness, because a weak fish simply cannot fake it. A male stickleback has a limited total stored energy reserve available exclusively for courtship displays, which he has built up through foraging. Every single zig or zag movement he makes costs him a specific amount of energy. To truly appreciate the evolutionary brilliance of this demanding ritual, we need to calculate exactly how much energy a male must invest every time a female approaches his nest. To quantify this physical toll, we introduce a simple linear formula for the energy cost per dance. Conceptually, the total cost is just the number of movements multiplied by the cost of each movement. On screen, ED represents the total energy required for one full courtship display. The variable N stands for the total number of individual movements required to sufficiently stimulate a female. Finally, the variable C represents the energetic cost per single movement. If a male performs more movements, or if the environment makes each movement harder, the total energy ED increases linearly. We must set up this foundational equation first because we cannot determine his overall limits without knowing the cost of a single dance. Now that we have our energy formula, let us apply it to a specific biological scenario. We are given that a standard, convincing courtship dance requires 20 movements, so N equals 20. We are also given that each individual zig or zag movement costs the male 2 joules of energy, so C equals 2. We want to find the total energy burden of one complete dance. We substitute 20 for N and 2 for C into our equation. Multiplying these values together, we find that one complete zigzag dance costs the male exactly 40 joules of energy. This is a significant metabolic investment for such a small fish, highlighting the incredibly high stakes of animal courtship. Knowing the cost of a single dance leads us to our final mathematical model, determining the male's absolute biological limits. To find the total number of dances a male can perform, represented by DT, we must divide his total energy reserves by the cost of a single dance. The variable ET represents the absolute maximum energy he has stored from foraging. We divide this total pool by ED, which we just calculated. This division step is crucial because it bridges the gap between his internal physiological limits and his external behavioral output. If his total energy drops due to starvation, the number of dances he can perform decreases directly. Let us put this final formula into practice. Suppose our male stickleback has a total stored energy reserve of 500 joules, available exclusively for courtship. So ET is 500. From our previous calculation, we know the single dance cost, ED, is 40 joules. We want to find how many complete courtship dances he can perform before exhausting his reserves. We substitute 500 for the total energy and 40 for the dance cost into our division formula. Performing this calculation, 500 divided by 40 yields a value of 12.5. This decimal represents the strict mathematical limit of his courtship abilities. We have calculated a mathematical limit of 12.5. But this brings us to a critical biological interpretation. Let us reason through what this decimal actually means in the wild. The math gives us 12.5, but a male cannot perform half of a successful dance to win a mate. The reaction chain requires completion. Therefore, we must interpret this biological reality carefully. The male can perform exactly 12 complete courtship dances before his energy is entirely depleted. He will run out of energy completely in the middle of his 13th attempt. This proves exactly why the female uses this dance to assess quality. Only a male with massive energy reserves can afford to perform this exhausting display multiple times. We have reached the end of our journey into stickleback courtship, so let us summarize the key takeaways. First, we learned that this courtship is a strict behavioral reaction chain, relying on alternating fixed action patterns triggered by visual sign stimuli. Second, we saw through sequential probability that this strictness naturally results in high failure rates, which acts as a filter for quality. Finally, we calculated the immense energetic cost of the zigzag dance, proving how it serves as an honest signal of male fitness. You have now covered the full topic, seeing firsthand how innate behaviors are finely tuned by natural selection to maximize reproductive success, while minimizing the waste of precious biological energy. Great job, and keep exploring the wonders of animal behavior.